Hello, and welcome to the Fempire Revival. My name is Liz. I'll be your host today. And with me are my very good friends, Haley, Naomi, Natalie, and Julia. Do you guys want to say hi and introduce yourself? We're going to start with Julia.
Hello, I'm Julia. Good to be here.
And it's good to have you, Julia. Naomi, if you could introduce yourself.
I am Naomi or Naomi. It doesn't. I don't really care.
It's wonderful to have you too. Haley,
Hi everyone, I'm Haley. Super excited to be here and super excited to tear things up with these ladies.
fantastic. And last, and certainly not least, Natalia, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi.
Excellent. So, the purpose of our group is we are a collective of women who are looking to empower other women and inspire grassroots organization that lets women connect with each other and center other women instead of centering men. We are going to talk today about how focusing and refocusing women's issues onto transphobia and taking a stance against transgender women actually hurts women and girls. And excuse me for one moment. Sorry about that. Okay. So it is very important as women that we maintain solidarity together. The people who are seeking to tear down transgender women are the same people who want to stick women back in traditional roles. Today, we're going to ask the question: how does excluding trans women harm feminism, and how can we actively counter this exclusion? And now I'd like to turn it over to my guests so they can share their thoughts.
So, this is something that I have had on my mind for quite a while, and I really see that a lot of these laws and policies that are being put in place really are a means to bring in a definition of what a woman is supposed to be, and thus in basically chaining all of us to what somebody else's perception of what a woman is, and really does tear down a lot of the progress that has been made in feminism over the last 100 years. And one example that kind of works is like with darts and things like that, where they're saying, oh, a trans woman can't compete because, uh, in their words, that she's a man. But what they're really doing is they're basically saying by proxy, women are inferior, and I don't like that.
I find the darts example to be the most infuriating one. I can play darts and I can play darts against men,
Yeah.
and I don't see what biological um, advantage that men have, especially since when I was younger, I frequently whooped all the men I was playing against ass because I had a good sense of aim, you know? And
Yep.
just the idea that a transgender woman is somehow not able to compete at the same level as other women or better by virtue of being transgender is offensive to women.
Well, exactly. And you look at a lot of the Olympic categories. For many sports, there was no men's and women's category for many years until a woman placed in a position that threatened the man at the top. And then you could look at this in the Olympics multiple times. As soon as that happened, they would either ban women outright or they would come back and say, okay, here's the men's category, here's the women's category.
I think it makes sense to divide sports categories by ability and to have divisions. Like, for example, in hockey, women can try out for men's hockey leagues, I believe, but most women can't compete in them. And so that ends up just being the hockey league. And I think if we just kept that down the tiers, then it would be less about gender and more about playing ability and having exciting games.
I would agree with that. And like I also would use the example of like with boxing and weight classes where it's not so much what your gender is, it's here's what your weight is in that category. And then it really shouldn't matter what your weight or what your gender is. It's coming down to more of just pairing you up with people of similar abilities within that particular tier.
I agree. There's a
So
lot of ways. So, no, Natalia, please go ahead.
no, I just want to say that this is, I think, symptom of
Always confused me.
Natalia, yeah. Natalia, why don't you continue your thought and then when Haley gets her connection issue straightened out, she can have hers.
I feel like generally young trans women under is kind of just a symptom of institutional feminism, which is what I just call the people who think that just staying around in an organization that does literally nothing other than just file papers to the government, so they does anything, which is but also that kind of just incentivizes just blood sport when it comes to it. So they're like, oh, we cannot just have rights for all women; we have to only fight for cis women or something. That or they're just transphobic, which is not surprising. Society in general is, which is also an issue. But feminism should be about social change, so we can probably change that, I assume.
One of the offensive areas that I find when people change the subject from cis women's issues to transgender women just existing, I should say, is the topic of women's prisons. I find when you talk about women's prisons that people who hate transgender women will somehow make issues about women's prison all about transgender people when there is an epidemic of guards raping the prisoners and prostituting them, and it's not something that gets addressed. And then when it does come up, there's always some person that comes along to say, "Well, you don't even know what a woman is," or are you going to let transgender women be and the thing is that transgender women are more likely to be harmed in prison than other groups of people. So I feel like a lot of the times when women talk to me about this issue, what they're really saying is that they're fine with some people getting raped depending on who they're getting
Yeah,
raped
but
by
like
and
in
where.
general, prisons are just dehumanizing and should be abolished.
I agree with you 100%.
Yes.
And we should abolish prisons. And if we're not going to abolish prisons, the least we can do is not put the most vulnerable members of our society in with people who are known to be predators that will harm them and destroy them further than just existing in a society that hates you already does.
Yeah, but like they already like do that to minorities disproportionately, and especially with trans women, because at least if it's a cis woman, they usually at least put her in the women's prison. But if it's a trans woman, she'll get put in the men's prison sometimes, and that's even more abusive.
And just to be clear here, women get raped in prison, both trans women and cis women. Like I'm including all women in this at rapes that we as a society or just don't acknowledge. Like we do not talk about how much the guards are raping women in prison and trans women and even men. Like our system is filled with sexual violence on the part of the people who should be in theory safeguarding the lives of those within.
Okay, but I would have to make them like have to recognize that prisons are just abusive.
Yes, prisons are abusive. They're not rehabilitative. And here in the States, we like to pretend that we're rehabilitating people in prison. And I don't see how we can pretend that when what we're really doing is further traumatizing them and taking away opportunities to grow. There used to be systems of education in our prisons and in our jails, and a lot of them have been defunded. It is not as easy to get a degree in prison as it used to be. There are a lot of structures to pull yourself up out of being a criminal that have been removed.
Generally, society will just kind of be really hostile to people who have been in prison.
One one thing I recently about the prison system is that it kind of comes down to being a self-fulfilling prophecy, where like if you throw a bunch of people into a box and you tell them they're terrible people and you tell them they're bad people and they're never going to amount to anything and they're never going to get better and all of this for years and years and years, when they do eventually get released, they're gonna believe those things. Like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where when you tell someone over and over again that they're one way, they're gonna start believing that they're one way. And that's basically what our prison system is as a whole, is just us telling this group of people, you guys suck and you're never gonna be better or worth anything. So then obviously they're not going to try, and obviously the recidivism rate is going to be high because they're going to eventually believe that they're just always going to be criminals.
Makes me sad because I'm a huge believer that anyone can turn around their life. And while I don't center specifically men in my activism or in a lot of the things I talk about, I think that it is a great injustice to the men of our country that we throw so many of them in prison, destroy their lives, their sense of well-being and security in the world, and break them and then throw them back out onto the streets. It's dangerous for women and it's dangerous for the men that it happens to.
Also, like when it comes to the discussion with prisons, it really feels like it's often centered on men.
It is often centered on men, which is part of why I came straight in here talking about the women's prisons issues. Last year, I believe there was a report issued on guards in prisons raping women, and I can't remember what the numbers were, but the amount of women being systematically sexually abused in prison was so high that I've literally blacked it out of my mind. Um, another topic that I've noticed gets derailed a lot is when you call people birthing persons and then people somehow make that about transgender women and transgender identifications and not the fact that girls can and do get pregnant and girls aren't women. And so you can't say pregnant women and include the unfortunate cases of the 12-year-olds that get pregnant because those are still girls, even if their reproductive system allows them to have children. And in the process of trying to reject trans people, we erase a real travesty in our society of young girls being pregnant.
So it's kind of just, sorry, this is kind of unrelated, but it's also just fighting against the term that nobody really uses. You're fighting against the term that's just used, professionally.
The way that I see that fight as being is that I view it as a deliberate attempt to decenter women and girls from the conversation. A lot of these
Yeah,
are being used to decenter women and girls.
yeah, but my point is more that, sorry,
Please continue.
my point is more that when they do that, they're not like even talking about a term that you know people are going to use like in their day-to-day lives.
Oh, yeah,
Literally,
no,
just
it's just something that medical people use at hospitals, 100%.
yeah, like it's just an excuse for them to be misogynist.
It's an excuse for them to reach into the healthcare of women and girls and control it. And yeah, and it is misogyny. Um,
Yeah, but
and
that's something they should never have control over because, as we have seen, groups that know nothing about the healthcare of people they're controlling generally don't actually make good policy or good decisions on those people's health.
that is so true that And we've known for a while that when you put people in control of a minority, they don't make good decisions on behalf of that minority. There's a reason why the disability community says nothing about us without us, you know?
Yeah.
You can't trust people who aren't you to have your best interest at mind. And this isn't a conversation for today, but it's actually that's part of why I have such an issue with representative and electoral politics is because I don't believe that I can vote for somebody and then they're going to care about me. I don't know that I believe that human beings are capable of caring about people over a certain number, if that makes sense. Like you can give a fuck about like 20 people, maybe 100.
Generally, that's just an issue of just, politicians like to keep themselves to power as well.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
not really a thing you can get rid of because it's just how the system works.
That's going though into the anarchism by itself without the intersection of anarchism and feminism.
Sorry,
Hmm.
Okay.
No, because I want to. You know, I want to talk to you about that and tell you I love talking to you. Let's talk about the bathroom issue. It's the most common one people talk about, and we haven't brought it up. And we'd actually throw in domestic violence shelters and the bathroom issue probably into the same conversation because it's just another way of pushing aside survivors and um, making issues where there are none.
I feel like one is like much worse than the other though, because uh, with bathrooms, it's kind of just like, okay, why care? Just let them use it. But like
The insistence that people
shelters,
get to choose if other people are allowed to pee or not really, really upsets me. Like
yeah.
I know I know you guys. I don't know. Have any of you ever been pregnant?
No.
Yeah.
Negative.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there might be only other one person that applies to in here. So when you're pregnant, you have to pee like every 5 minutes, and the sense of empathy that I have for transgender women in the city who can't find a bathroom was extremely developed. I knew every single bathroom that I could go into without buying something in the entire city of Portland, Oregon, because of how much I had to pee. And it's not much. Like there's just not as many like unisex bathrooms and stuff. And I had them all memorized because you don't want to buy a coffee. At the public spaces that you can go into are minuscule in most cities.
And I will
Yeah.
say that trans women depending on which medication they're on, and this also would apply to cis women, spirulactone, which is used to control hormonal issues like PCOS and things like that. It is a diuretic, and it is very commonly prescribed to trans women. And so, on top of having issues with going to the bathroom, they also have to use the bathroom much more than what they may otherwise would have to, which just compounds the whole issue of bathroom accessibility.
Thank you
Uh,
for telling me that because when I'm out with one of my trans friends, I had noticed that she pees more than me, and I'm not nosy enough to ask why.
Yeah, I'm on spironolactone actually.
That does explain having to go to the bathroom 3 times during the same dinner.
Yes, it does.
Let's switch
I guess I'm
focuses. Oh, sorry. No. Please, Natalia. Does anybody else after Natalia goes have anything else to say about this one?
Yeah, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I wanted to say
Natalia?
about like the abuse shelters. I'm not sure which organization it was that was actually running them, but it was some organization just like didn't let trans women in, and that's like extremely harmful because you're probably killing them at that point. Because when they're seeking shelter, it means that they genuinely like need help. You cannot just turn them away and be like, okay, yeah, go to a shelter, or you'll likely be abused even more because they were like suggesting they go to men's shelters, which is not a good idea for trans women for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of trans women would, if they were put in that position, would probably be quite fearful of any scenario if they're running into where they get turned away.
But like, it's people mostly running from domestic violence, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
And
why would
which
you?
trans women are more likely to experience than the rest of the population.
Yeah, sadly.
Which I take issues with the domestic shelter thing because of that. Because what are you doing running a program where you aren't going to be helpful to the most vulnerable? And there was also a transgender employee at one of the shelters who had been doing good work for years. And I can't remember the case off the top of my head. And one of these groups that hates trans people made it their mission to like stop her from doing what was clearly her calling and helping abused women, um, because they felt like they got to have feelings about it. And I don't understand this overreach into other people's business. Have you guys spent time talking to people who have been abused at all?
Yes.
It's not easy work. Anybody who wants to spend day in and day out helping people and listening to the kinds of stories that you hear just running this group, I have heard horrific stories of abuse and gang rape and things that no human should have to endure. And I do a lot of exercise and self-care to kind of help me digest the things that people tell me on a daily basis. And I just really feel like anybody who can put aside their ego enough to help other people like that should be allowed to help.
It's
100%.
really heartbreaking. It is. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's not easy to listen to at all.
No, no. And it weighs
Yeah.
on the soul. And it's hard to keep up and keep doing day after day. I'm sorry, Natalia?
I was going to say this is why it's like such a bad thing for me because you're denying help to the people who need it the most, who are like hurting the most. You know,
Yeah.
that is kind of objectively bad, like a bad thing to do.
I think that brings us to the transition of what strategies can we use to ensure that our movement actively uplifts and protects all women?
Oh, I think there were people who wanted to say something else.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I speak to the third topic too. So let anybody who has to say anything else go now, and we'll go to the correct second topic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like people bring up like, the whole bathroom thing and like how, men could like pretend to be trans or whatever and just like go in there to be predators, but like it it just like it doesn't make sense to me because it like a perverted man does not need to go through that much effort to be a pervert. They already do. They're already perfectly fine doing that without any of that. Like they can already.
Don't think that we should be telling people to stop living their lives the way that they should because perverted men do shit anyway. I think that we should crack down on the perverted men.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like
Exactly.
being
yeah. I
horny in
think
this
I would
country,
want
but you have
to.
free pass. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I would just want to emphasize that that's still a men's issue. It's not. That's not an issue with trans women at that point. That's an issue with men not behaving right, like they have historically failed to do through all of human history. Like, if men are dressing up as women and pretending to be trans women and sneaking into bathrooms to victimize women, that's not a women's issue. That's a man issue of men fucking not behaving the way that they should be. So I think it's a silly thing to even put it on trans women.
Producer Erica would like to speak. Erica, I'm sorry I didn't mention that you were in here earlier. I got a little nervous since this is my first time hosting a podcast. Thank you
It's
for producing.
it's absolutely fine. Just the fact that I'm a producer means that I'm generally in the background, but the whole bathroom topic and the idea that the men are perverted. The reason I can see the reason why everyone, starts throwing a fit about trans women in the bathroom, it's because they've been taught the Ray Blanchard protocol. Anyone that is not biologically female according to their standards is a pervert. Thanks to Ray Blanchard.
Is someone pull up that quote where Ray Blanchard says a slur again? A slur he's not allowed to say, he never should say.
This is the Ray Blanchard that fetishizes transgender people, right?
Yeah,
For those
I
who
don't
aren't
think there is
familiar.
another one.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about. He's the doctor that came up with the entire protocol that most trans people had to go through to medically transition in the first place.
He's also insanely transphobic, we should mention.
This goes back to what I said about the disability community telling people nothing about us without us. I think that the transgender community really needs to be pulled into discussions. And when we get to that topic that I accidentally brought up first, we'll talk about it, and given leadership positions to allow them to advocate for themselves in their own treatment, because you obviously cannot trust cisgendered men and even cisgendered women to make good decisions for transgender people. They need to have their own voices. Speaking
I
of
mean,
transition, does anybody else have anything to say about this part of the topic?
I do, and it actually I think it will kind of tie into the next topic we're going to talk about with the harm reduction, which is just feelings about bathrooms and domestic violence shelters are how I feel about the movement as a whole. Sorry, my dog's kind of freaking out right now for some reason. Um, which is that ultimately, in an ideal world, I think people don't realize, in an ideal world for me, gender in bathrooms shouldn't matter.
Oh, Haley, you were talking and then you suddenly muted out.
Yeah, dog's just freaking out. Give me 1 second to send her outside so she doesn't interrupt the conversation.
Got you.
I'll be just.
While you're doing that, the second topic was actually, how does excluding trans women harm feminism, and how can we actively counter this exclusion? So I feel like if we just add that into the mix, we can continue this conversation as we've been anyway.
yeah, I've actually had this for a little while. I think that a lot of transphobia comes down to trans women not being traditionally feminine enough. So it's just they feel like this box is being challenged, and I mean that's misogyny, really. That's just what it is.
Yeah, and I would say that that also generally applies to kind of some of the more historical situations where any woman that didn't fit the prescribed box of what traditional or socially pushed version of what a woman should be is, and any woman that falls outside of that gets shunned or excluded or heavily encouraged to conform to provide that image of what femininity and what woman is supposed to be as per society's standards. And you can really see that in situations, especially with people of color or people with disabilities, where they don't fit that. I'll just use the Barbie model, and they're just like, nope, you don't fit, so therefore we're now going to question your womanhood.
It's funny that you said the Barbie model, because I envision gender conversations like boxes. And I was thinking when you were talking about the Barbie movie, when they try to tie her into the Barbie box and she
Yeah,
escapes. And I feel like that was such a metaphor for womanhood. Like, men are always trying to get us to go into the correct box and stay there. and this phobia against transgender people is the whole no, women have to be this way and men have to be this way. And if you're not going to be that way, then it's wrong, which segues into how does excluding trans women harm feminism and harm women? And I would say that this idea that women have to be a certain way to be appropriately woman is going to get certain women beat up. And not
Yes.
like in a minor way. Like I used to be pretty not gender non-conforming. I used to have hair that was like an inch long and dye it bright red and just walk around all happy. And I have actually started growing my hair long lately so that I look more like the woman I am, just because I'm scared of these men around bathrooms now.
Well, well, and there's already been reports about cis women who don't present as the traditional model of what society has prescribed, and they are getting harassed and accused of being trans women. And this directly hurts all women because now we're not able to be who we are. We're not able to just present how it is for us for whatever our situation is, and we're all being criticized for it, and that affects all women, trans women and cis women.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'm honest.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say that, like, people have disbelieved that I was a trans woman because, like, I have some, like I'll leave my room kind of like messy or whatever, or, I have a few quote unquote masculine characteristics. I mean, I would say mostly I'm feminine, but like, it just makes me question, like, if a cisgender woman acted the same way, would they still would you still question their femininity? It just seems like, you know it's a double
Would actually
standard.
like to tackle that because first of all, if having a messy bedroom is masculine, my daughter is going to grow a penis any day now. And
Yeah.
second, sorry to be graphic about it, but like, are you kidding me? And I have what I call male presenting ADHD, which means that I did get diagnosed in school very early because I was acting like one of the little boys with ADHD and they understood the symptoms. But it also means my whole life I've had issues with gender because they do push you into the box, Naomi. Like if you're a messy woman, like people tell you that you're not feminine and that you're supposed to pick up and that women are supposed to know how to clean. And so if you're wondering if the pressure is there, absolutely from the other side, yeah. Like the pressure to be a woman who nurtures and cleans and is organized and makes things pretty and nice and can put together the right Christmas party and wrap the presents the exact way that they're supposed to be wrapped and all of that is like astronomically high depending on the family you come from.
So I just want to say,
Sorry, Christmas just happened and you can tell that I don't feel like I did a good enough job as a woman. My presents were not wrapped neatly. Uh, we have just a few minutes left, and I would like to talk about the strategies that we can use to ensure that our movement remains uh, friendly and uplifting to all women, and how we can overcome the problems that we've just spent the last 45 minutes or so talking about.
Ooh, can I say something?
You can always.
This kind of ties into what I was saying before my dog had her little meltdown a couple minutes ago. But I think one thing that we can do moving forward for the movement and that we should do is that we need to be like really clear about what the vision is, if it's fully realized, right? And like when we're talking about the bathroom topic or the domestic violence shelters topic, um, I think that Liz, we've talked about it before in one of the group chats, but um, the, the ideal situation in mind is a world where gender literally doesn't matter. like the reason that segregated bathrooms are a thing right now is because generally people can't be trusted to behave if they're in a bathroom, that's co-ed. But in an ideal world, I think all of these places would be co-ed because we would be able to trust people to behave themselves. Um, so as far as like the bathroom thing, when people say, "Oh, you know, would you really be okay with being in a bathroom with a trans person or with a man or whatever?" My problem isn't necessarily with anyone being in the bathroom with me. I don't care. It's a public bathroom. I'm just going in there to pee. Um, but people need to behave themselves in those situations, and I think it should be more about that behavior than some arbitrary segregation line that we draw in the sand.
And I would compare that to washing hands, where I don't care who you are in the bathroom, wash your hands. But if I see you try and walk out without washing your hands, I'm going to say something. And I think that
Yeah,
applies to the whole bathroom situation. We need to all be calling out behavior that is inappropriate and not acceptable in those places. Let everyone go to the bathroom. Let them go pee.
I
yeah.
think not washing your hands is 100% the antisocial thing that people don't do in the bathroom compared to like just peeing.
Wait, I haven't like been in a public bathroom for some time, for some reasons, but they don't wash their hands. What?
Oh yeah, like some people do not wash their hands in public
Why?
bathrooms. And I can understand, listen, if you're in your house and you're like, I disinfect this place and I'm the only one that cleans it and they're my germs, I get it. I've lived in an apartment by myself, okay? But if you go to the bathroom in a public bathroom and you don't wash your hands, I'm judging the fuck out of you.
Yes.
I mean, in a public bathroom, I don't really care if people wash it at home when they're alone, but come on. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just trying to make my stances here clear, okay? Because like I did say I was ADHD as fuck at the top of this, and like ADHD people in their own homes sometimes don't do well with the rituals like washing your hands all the time. So I don't want anybody to think I was coming after them.
Yeah, same.
Listen,
I was like, people
Yeah.
don't do it in the public bathrooms, which I don't get because they're in public space. But yeah, I guess.
I work in a public building with maintenance personnel, and let me tell y'all, the nasty shit that adults will do in public bathrooms would blow your fucking minds. I don't know if we're cussing on this podcast, but like it really needs to be said to emphasize the point. Adult bathrooms in public turn into animals. I don't know what it is. It's not a gender thing. It's just uniform across the board. I swear to God, people go into public bathrooms and lose their damn minds.
It's funny that you say that because it seems like as human beings, I 2 points in this. One, you can see the same thing happen with rental cars, like, people abuse the shit out of rental cars when they rent them because it's not their car. And also, like, I think that in general and this actually goes back to the safeguarding the movement thing, when you give people a piece of something that belongs to them, that they're not just using or there temporarily, but it's, like, partially theirs, they treat it better than something that they're visiting. And I wish more people treated everywhere that they went like it was something that they had a little personal ownership in. But I've definitely noticed this phenomenon of treating things better that you have ownership in.
That's actually like a legit phenomenon that is discussed in like sociology classes that you actually just reminded me of. It's called the tragedy of the commons, which is basically a phenomenon where if people view a resource like a thing that everyone take advantage of it, but they won't responsibility for the upkeep of that public resource, and that it becomes a whole problem. So not really related to the topic, but it is a phenomenon that's really interesting to read about. So
I would say, Haley, that that is extraordinarily related to the topic because we are talking about how to safeguard a movement, and if the way to safeguard the movement is to make sure that everybody has ownership in it and works on it and therefore feels like they need to protect it and care about it, like that's a preventative measure. Along with defining the goals and the acceptable behaviors, and then if we go back to the community psychology thing, when people don't abide by the group norms, I think the shaming is important. I know that some groups don't like that, but when you have somebody in your group that's behaving inappropriately and you shame them until you stop, you create a group member who can become productive instead of just chasing them out and ostracizing them right away. But I also think that it's important to kick people out of movements that don't want to be useful and they don't want to be social. I think that a lot of people will put grace on the squeaky wheel instead of tossing the squeaky wheel out with the trash.
Gotta be intolerant of intolerance.
Every
End of the
single
day.
day.
Yeah. Well, and
Welcome to the people who just joined. If you want to talk, you can message me in the chat your name and I'll call on you. For those of us who can't see, we had a few members of the chat come in.
We had 2 people join, it looks like.
Hmm. And I would just call them out by their names, except for I'm not, Discord screen names don't translate well to calling people by. Well, that's good. All right. So I think another thing that we can do with our movements to make sure that they stay the way we intended is to put people in leadership who are diverse and intentionally pick people from underrepresented groups and give them power so that they have the ability to really assert themselves and also create on an equal level.
I would agree with that. And like, I'm involved in a local group that's basically championing gender and sexuality and things like that. And one of the mandates that was recently agreed on is that there must be somebody from the trans community on the council, just so that we have that voice being heard and that there is that seat at the table so that everything being discussed isn't being done in a vacuum without that representation. And I think that that kind of applies to a lot of scenarios, exactly what you were saying, of having minorities and underrepresented individuals, specifically putting them in those positions.
And I will say that this group is overrepresented in leadership with transgender people. I think that transgender people make up like 2% of the population, right? And they're half of our leadership because I think that they need half of the voice.
I actually think that transgender people are like 1%. It's not, it's like really, it's really small. It's a small amount.
It's bigger than we know, though.
Yeah, I think that the number of transgender people is like estimated it at 2% because that's the highest estimate that I've seen. But like we don't really seem to have a good understanding of it. I would like I would like to live in a society that treated people, let me back up. In the insect world, the caterpillar and the butterfly are the same creature, but they transform at some point to become something that is different than they originally started. And I kind of think that people go through transformative stages too. And we get our butterfly wings. And this isn't just transgender people. I feel like I've gotten my wings too, as somebody who's finally started living exactly the person they are all the time and stopped putting on masks everywhere. And I would like to live in a society that expected and celebrated people's beautiful transformations, whether their gender or personality or creative interest, whatever it be, and just really started loving people for who they are the way that they are.
Actually use the whole butterfly like metaphor for trans stuff. Like I know a lot of people use like the egg thing, but like personally that's what I use. So yeah.
That's how I envision transgender women too. I didn't realize until recently that also it had my transformation, but my friend Melinda, you guys will hear me talk about her a lot. She was very important to me. When she transitioned, like she came out the other side a completely different person and yet somehow exactly the same person she'd always been. And the only thing that I could think of that does that is a butterfly. And so that's just been kind of how I envision it.
Well, and it's interesting because you have so many people where they're using the butterfly metaphor, where you have the caterpillar, you have the butterfly, but everybody's focusing on the cocoon stage, and they're just like, look at this cocoon. It's not a butterfly. It's just a caterpillar in a silk nest. It's not a butterfly. Well,
Ooh.
it's no, you're just seeing the transition stage. You're not seeing the person outside of their transition to when they become a butterfly.
Oh, Julia, I love that. I'm gonna add that to how I envision it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just thought of it in this conversation, and I'm going to be using that as well when I talk to some of my other friends as well.
Well, so I think today, we've talked about how the constant redirecting over to what about trans people prevents women's issues from even being discussed. We've talked about how the same forces that push transgender people into a box are also the same oppressive forces that push women into boxes. And we spent a little bit of time talking about our failed prison system and its abusive people. I just want to reiterate that having solidarity with people who are on the same rung of life as you is really important. And I know that I brought up the anarchism thing before, but I think that a lot of people spend their time looking out for people that they think of as better than them or more worthy. And we could all benefit with centering ourselves and the other people who are going through the same struggles as us. And for feminists and women, transgender women are women going through the same struggles as cisgendered women. So the solidarity aspect of it just really cannot be reinforced enough. Before we wrap up, does anybody else have any last points that they want to make?
Yeah, I want to say, I feel like a lot of the time when someone is transphobic towards trans women, it's just kind of a carrier for misogyny that they feel like they cannot express towards cis women without being like swarmed much more. And because a lot more people are going to defend just misogyny against cis people, especially in feminist spaces, than they are, misogyny against trans people.
Yeah, I would
Yep.
agree. Transphobia is really being used as a carrier for misogyny, and it's being used against all women under the guise of protecting women when it's really not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like one of those Trojan horse like things where they're just hiding the actual
Yes.
intention inside of it.
Naomi, that's exactly it. And like it's the Trojan horse. Every single time you try to talk about the abortion bans in the United States, somebody always gets in the conversation to be like, well, are they birthing persons? And what even is a woman? Also, just before we end this, can I just say you sound fucking stupid when you say, "What is a woman?" Like, you had a mother or a sister, or presumably some women in your life when you were little that you could have asked these basic questions in life of, and it doesn't sound clever or intelligent when you say to me, a grown ass woman who is not your mom, what is a woman? Like, a woman is somebody who's about to block your ass.
Educate yourself. Then like, that educate yourself. Don't be misogynist and then be like, oh, what is a woman? Expecting an actual answer.
Yeah, if you say to a woman, what is a woman online when she's trying to talk about women's issues, you should expect nothing less than being blocked and talked shit about.
Yeah, I agree.
Better yet is when men try and tell you what a woman is. Like, buddy, I don't think you're the subject matter expert here, but let's hear what bullshit you decide to come up with, like, anyway.
Well, ladies, this has been an exciting first episode, and I cannot wait to do this again with you all. I hope that I will continue to improve as a host and that next week we can have just as great of a conversation. You can find us on social media at Fempire Revival on, I believe, Instagram, Zitter. I am Lusty Lizard Lady on Blue Sky and Reddit. And I think that is it for the socials, unless I've forgotten one, ladies. And for the viewers, a little bit of inside baseball here. I don't think that's actually the phrase, but someone else set up the socials for me. We've all been working on this project together, and there's 3 of us that have really managed to make this happen. And now Natalia has also jumped in doing a huge amount of heavy lifting too. Special thanks to Haley, Natalia, and Erica for all of the great work that they've done making sure that this podcast happens. And a big thanks to Erica for producing. I could not do the technical things that you do, and I appreciate you so much. And that's
Well,
all for today. Oh, Erica, did you want to say something?
yeah, I was just going to say that it definitely didn't go off without a hitch, but I'm going to get everything worked out for next week.
We all have room for improvement, I'm sure. I am pleased as punch with it going off at all. And ladies, the Fempire Revival has begun. Stand ready.